Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating and honestly, deeply relatable. We're looking at the psychology of the observed self. Basically, why your brain seemingly breaks the second someone watches you work. If you've ever felt like your competence just vanishes into thin air the moment you're under the gaze of an observer, yeah, you are in exactly the right place.
So, let's start with a highly frustrating reality. Have you ever been perfectly capable of doing a totally mundane task? I mean, parallel parking on an empty street, typing a super simple email, maybe just chopping vegetables in your kitchen, right up until the exact moment someone walks into the room and starts watching you. Suddenly, it's like you've completely forgotten how to be a human being. Your hands get heavy, and you start making these incredibly clumsy mistakes that you would absolutely never make if you were alone. It's so frustrating, right?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the immediate assumption we usually make is that we're incompetent or maybe just dealing with standard social anxiety. But actually, that's not what's happening here at all. Think of it like this. While everyone else is walking around experiencing life in standard 480p resolution, your brain, it's attempting to process an 8K IMAX experience of sensory data. You aren't broken. Your psychology is just playing this high-stakes game of chess where visibility feels like a direct threat. And man, it takes a massive amount of processing power to handle that kind of high-resolution data.
Section 1. High perceptual sensitivity. Or, to put it another way, why your brain basically has zero chill.
We really need to reframe what society casually brushes off as stage fright or shyness. We need to call it what it actually is, a legitimate physiological trait known as high perceptual sensitivity. You see, to your brain, an observer isn't just some casual bystander hanging out in the doorway. No way. They are a massive, totally unregulated data source. Because your brain operates with this high sensitivity, it's literally taking screenshots of every single micro-expression on that observer's face. It's recording their subtle tonal shifts. It's analyzing their body language, all simultaneously. While the typical brain automatically filters out about 90% of this background noise, yours is frantically cross-referencing every bit of it in real time.
Just think about the absolute cognitive chaos happening in your prefrontal cortex. You know, the part of your brain responsible for complex thinking and planning. When you're being watched, your brain allocates its resources completely backward. It gets so busy babysitting the observer's potential judgments that it dedicates a whopping 90% of its processing power to them. That leaves a measly 10% of your mental RAM to actually, finish the physical task in front of you. Honestly, no wonder you dropped the metaphorical ball.
All right, moving on to Section 2. Why the spotlight burns. Let's look at the 3 reasons your operating system glitches.
So, we know the hardware is overwhelmed, but let's look at the specific psychological reasons behind the software crash. Reason number 1 is a phenomenon psychologists call the next-in-line effect. This happens when we're anticipating our turn to perform or speak. Your memory for the actual task just absolutely plummets. Why? Because you are editing yourself in real time. You become so intensely laser-focused on how you appear from the outside that you completely lose that flow state you actually need to do the work. The self-editing completely overrides the execution.
Reason number 2. You likely have what researchers call mirror neurons on steroids. You don't just visually see an observer, you emotionally download their expectations, their boredom, or their impatience. It's like you're an emotional Wi-Fi router just accidentally absorbing the entire energy of the room. And this leads to massive psychological overload because you're pairing all of their emotional weight right on top of your own cognitive load.
And the third reason? Well, this one is deeply rooted in our developmental history. It's this idea of visibility as vulnerability. This rings especially true if you were a latchkey kid, part of Gen X, or just grew up in what's called a high-contingency environment. You learned very early on that being seen usually meant being corrected. Visibility didn't feel like a fun highlight reel. It felt incredibly risky. So you built up this emotional armor. You realized that the less people knew about what you were doing, the safer you were. So when we put all these pieces together, the picture gets pretty clear. You've got these 3 system glitches. The real-time editing from the next-in-line effect, the emotional downloading from your mirror neurons on steroids, and that deeply ingrained belief that visibility equals vulnerability. It's literally the perfect storm. It perfectly explains why your brain treats simple observation like a high-stakes game of chess that requires immediate, heavy emotional armor.
Which brings us to Section 3, the shield of solitude, recharging versus armoring up.
Now, we have to look at a slightly heavier, more introspective side of this whole phenomenon, our relationship with privacy itself. Ask yourself, are you seeking solitude because it genuinely recharges your batteries, or are you using it as a defensive mechanism? Because there is a very crucial difference here.
On one side, we have healthy unsociability. That's a calm, confident preference for your own company. It feels good, it's restorative. But on the other side, we have armor. That's when you use solitude to shield yourself against the vulnerability of connection. Look, if the mere thought of being watched feels fundamentally dangerous, rather than just, a bit annoying, it's highly likely your nervous system has basically been stuck in crisis mode since elementary school.
In that crisis mode, it often leads straight into what we call the fixer trap. This is the internalized belief that if you aren't performing absolutely perfectly, you simply aren't valued. It demands this immense, exhausting amount of emotional labor to constantly manage and manipulate how other people perceive you. You're constantly trying to fix their perception of you through flawless execution, which, as we've just learned, is quite literally impossible when your brain's RAM is completely maxed out.
So the real takeaway here is understanding the heavy, heavy toll this takes on you. Constantly running this background program of emotional labor, constantly anticipating judgment, constantly feeling vulnerable the second you're observed, it results in this bone-deep tiredness. It's a profound exhaustion that a good night's sleep simply cannot fix, because it's a subconscious psychological drain, not just a physical one. If you've been feeling absolutely wiped out by this, I want you to know your experience is completely valid.
All right, Section 4, your quiet brilliance. Let's talk about reframing your associative architecture.
Here is where we pivot. We really need to shift this mindset from feeling broken to recognizing your profound perceptual gifts. Because the goal here isn't to suddenly force yourself to love the spotlight. No way. First and foremost, you need to realize that your brain's associative architecture is built for incredible, incredible depth. It is not built for on-demand performance. And because of that, you know what? You are allowed to be a beginner at being observed. You don't have to be perfect. You don't even have to be useful every single second of the day. You really need to internalize that simply being is enough.
And here's perhaps the most empowering realization of the whole explainer. You are not socially inept. Actually, it's the exact opposite. You are socially sophisticated. Your brain processes so much social data that your refusal to just play pretend when someone is breathing down your neck, that's actually a sign of highly advanced social perception. You see the game being played, and your brain just flat out refuses to play it under duress.
So if you've ever felt like you'd much rather, befriend a cactus than perform for a crowd, take some comfort in the fact that you have absolutely found your people here. There is a whole community of the quietly brilliant out there whose brains process the world in this incredibly high-definition, highly sensitive way. It's a feature, not a bug, as long as you understand exactly how it works.
Now I want to hear from you. Drop a